All right, we're live. Let's go. Logan, thanks for jumping on the pod.
Of course, man. I honestly couldn't be more excited. It's crazy that it's been like 2 months since the race, almost exactly.
Yeah. It's actually nuts. It's 2 months of yesterday would have been when we finished the race. I
I I love that.
yeah, I actually I went for I went for a run at night a couple days ago. I think it was 3, so it was this last Thursday,
Hmm.
and it was the first time I took my headlamp out and used it on a run. And then I was running and was like, damn, when was the race? And I opened it up and was like, no way, it's 2 months to this weekend, which is crazy because we'd already lined up this pod and like that was like some serendipity. So just yeah, I'm pumped to dive into this and get a recap just for everybody listening. So Logan and I both ran the Cascade 100, which is the 100-mile ultramarathon race from Bend, Oregon to Sisters, Oregon. And it was 12,000 feet elevation gain, 12,500 feet elevation decline or whatever um, drop. And that was August 26th of 2023. And just serendipity of our schedule lining up. It was the 2 month anniversary of the it's crazy, 8 weeks ago. So yeah, I'm super excited that we get to connect over this because before you even click record, um, we were talking about just how special it is. Like no one knows better of what I went through than you because you went through it as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, just thank you for being here, and I'm fired up to
Oh, of course,
unpack
man.
this.
Of course.
Yeah,
I'm happy like we stayed in touch post race. You reached out, and honestly, you were the number one guy I ran next to throughout that 31 hours. We just kept like leapfrogging each other. So
yeah,
it was cool. Like we would talk for like 5-10 minutes at a time, separate, and then link back up an hour or two in the future. So it was fun. It was fun getting to know you during the race.
yeah. It's crazy because we can kind of jump around, but this is like a good starting off point. But it was actually, do you remember? Maybe we can work back to prepping for the race, but I think this is a good place to. Speaking of the leapfrogging, was we were like chit chatting and catching up like at the beginning of the race, so we were like 10-ish miles in, and that's where
Hmm.
we connected. So just a little backstory for everybody. So during the race, we were like 10 miles in, and we just started chit chatting because maybe if you don't know, like I guess I didn't really know either because it was my first time racing, but it was like you're like jogging at like I don't know 14. It's like 12 to 18 minute pace, so you can like chit chat while you're motoring or like
Hmm.
you're hiking up a hill or maybe you're jogging down. So yeah, it was super cool. We could just like talk and just learning about each other, and we were just talking about the race, and it was kind of like I know for me at least at the beginning of the race, even just chit chatting with you, it made time go by way quicker. Where
Oh yeah, definitely.
you like look up and you're like, oh man, it's like pretty light out, and then you look at your watch and you're like, dang, I'm already like 3 hours in. And
Yeah,
did
that
you
whole the whole
did
like
you
first day until sundown, I feel like went by so much faster than I could have imagined. There's like all of a sudden, oh wow, we have been like moving for like 10-12 hours, where I think going into the race that was like one of my biggest concerns, like what is 12 hours going to feel like? Like what is 15 hours going to feel like? But I think just running around people and chatting with them and passing the time however you honestly could made that first day fly by.
yeah, were there other concerns going into the race?
Going into the race, I mean, just the fact that you don't know if it's possible, at least for me, like
Yeah.
that was probably the biggest concern. You
Hmm.
hear, I mean, you probably listened to a ton of podcasts, read books, like connected with people who had run hundreds before, so you hear like all the common things that could possibly go wrong. But I think the biggest thing for me was I just didn't know if it was possible still at
Hmm.
that time. Like
Hmm.
throughout the entire first 24 hours, honestly, I was like, how far south is this going to turn, and do you have it in you to keep going and like finish it?
Yeah.
So
So true. I what was your morning like? I want to. I think actually that would be a good place to start. I was gonna start with after I got absolutely cratered by that hill and we crossed paths again. But I think that hill was like one of the hardest things I've ever done. But we can get into that later. I'm curious, what was like waking up the morning of? How was that prepping for the race?
Honestly, I'll go back to the night before the morning if that's okay.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's go.
I don't think I've ever fell asleep like so excited.
Oh yeah,
You know,
that's yeah.
like you're kind of like prepping as best you can, but it's all kind of in vain because nothing you're going to do the night before is really going to
Mm,
make a difference at that point. So you're like foam rolling and hydrating and reading over just like the game plan and having like a crew meeting. So it's kind of like stressing all these like small things, but really the work is already done at that point. You're either going to do it or you're not.
yeah, the hay is in the barn. Yeah.
Right. So I think the morning of, just woke up, pretty normal routine, had my electrolytes and breakfast I always had. And then kind of just like sitting there. I remember sitting in the living room of the Airbnb, just thinking like, wow, it's gonna happen.
Mm,
I get pretty quiet, I think, before like big moments start. So it was a lot of just like sitting. I think I got up like way too early in the morning, but just like sitting and reflecting on kind of what is to come. You know,
hmm
I had the ride to the starting line was with my crew, my family, my friends. So it was a good time. It was exciting. The calm before the storm. You know.
Yeah, 100%. I was,
Well,
yeah, I didn't really know what to expect for myself because it was just like I've never done anything where I'm like, wow, this is gonna be. Like it's different than running a marathon or doing like some big moment because you can get like pumped up for that.
mhm,
Where
for
I
sure.
felt like when I woke up in the morning, I had a cold brew, kind of went through the normal routine, like had some oatmeal, and I just like put on some music, like some country music, and it was like really quiet. And I kind of just sat there and was like, oh, like I like kind of got emotional because it's like you, it's like I was almost like at peace because you're
Mhm.
like, this is gonna be very long. Like it's kind of weird, like knowing you're gonna do something that's gonna take over 24 hours. It was like
Right.
I don't need to get hyped right now. I just need to like make sure I don't forget anything. And it was like a weird. It was like a weird, calm excitement. Like
I love that. Yeah, I think going into it, my plan was to stay baseline as well as I could for as long as I could. Like, don't get too high, don't get too low. Just try to maintain like an even keel. Don't get too excited. Don't get too
yeah,
down. Like, just play it cool, play it calm. And I think that was probably like the key factor, honestly.
Mhm.
But like you were saying,
yeah,
you don't want to get like amped up listening to like heavy rock or rap like first thing in the morning and just to get like go out of the gate like as strong as possible because then that low is pretty low after that.
yeah. It's like that was one thing I learned from the race was like everything comes in waves.
Hmm.
Is like it was like there were ups and downs, but like it's like when something bad was happening, you're like, all right, this is gonna go away in a bit. And then it's like when things are going good, you're like, all right, I got to take advantage of this because it's gonna go away in a bit.
And you never know like how long that high is going to last for, so you really
Yeah,
do try to like suck everything out of it that you possibly can.
yeah. That's yeah. The heading to the race was yeah. It was like such a unique experience. I've never had anything like that where I just I was like the whole point of the race for me at least. I just kept reminding myself it was like every single mile is the fun part,
Mm,
and then it's like finishing is like also fun, and that's like what we're doing it for. But I just like it was a joke. Like when I first saw my crew at like 30 mile 37, it was like this is so fun. Like I'm having so, or like I said that to myself quite a bit, where like something would be like shitty, and I'd be like, oh my, and I'm like this is I'm having fun. I'm pretty sure this is what fun feels like, and I was trying to remind myself that at the beginning because yeah, it's like the biggest pill in the world to swallow. Like you're like, oh man, there's a chance I'm gonna be out there for like the max time. Like
Oh yeah.
that's
I mean,
yeah.
we were pretty close.
Yeah, I was 11 minutes off.
Yeah,
So
we were pretty close to the max time.
yeah, because you ran a 31:20, right?
Yeah, I think like maybe 15, 20 minutes before you.
Yeah, 31:20:55 was your finishing time, which
It's pretty slow, but we got it done.
yeah, you're just racing yourself. That was
Yeah.
that was one thing that my crew asked me. They were like, "Well, what's your goal time, or is your goal to finish?"
Hmm.
And it was like, "Oh, like I mean, I'd prefer faster, so I didn't have to like wear it as long, you know?
Oh, for
Like
sure.
it would have been more fun. It would have been fun to finish sooner, so it just didn't suck as long.
Suck
But
as long, yeah.
yeah, but I was like, but my goal is to finish under the cutoff time. So yeah, did you have a goal going in regards to your pace and your time and all of that?
So kind of like you, overall goal was to finish, and then secondary goal was 28 hours. At the time, I thought that was realistic, but
Hmm.
how naive I was, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That was in the same boat. I'd be like 26 to like 30 would be sweet.
mhm,
I was like, I can 18 minutes because basically it came out to it's like if you did it was like 18 minutes and 8 seconds pace is
mhm,
32 hours.
exactly right.
Yeah. But
And
yeah. And then,
before you start, you're thinking, wow, 18 minutes. I could walk that, you know.
yeah. So true. So true. Especially at the beginning when they said at the beginning of the race when it was like they said go and
Hmm.
the gun went off or whatever, it was like everybody kind of comes out excited. That
Hmm.
that was something where like my buddies were like, "Hey man, like when in doubt at the beginning, just take it slow. Like you got to leave stuff in the tank." And that was something that it was just interesting looking around, like how gung ho everybody was, and people were like cooking, especially because it feels way better running on the road than
Oh, it does. And it was
yeah.
like, and it was cold. You're super fresh. I remember right when maybe like a mile after the race started, I got kind of like goosebumps. I think that's when it really hit me. Like, oh, we're gonna be out here for a while. Like, this is what we came here for. Like
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
we were still on the road, I was like, wow, this is going to be long, and I love that. You know, like this is what we signed up for.
Yeah, I
Uh,
remember. I remember when we finished the first mile, and it was like you're running on the road, and then you cut over into the. I think the first mile was off the road, but we like turned right and started getting
mhm.
on this like the dirt logging trail and all of that, and it was just like your watch like beep, and you're like, oh, I got 99 of these left. Like that part was just like comical. You're like, oh man, here we go. Like let's yeah, yeah, that was pretty funny. And just being like it was interesting seeing different people's approach. Like a lot of people had packed up like a ton of gear and
Mhm.
then yeah, that was yeah, the start was interesting.
When did when was this race on your radar, or even like 100 miler at all on your radar to
Yeah, great
sign up
question.
for, train for?
Yeah, so I backstory was I read this book called The Comfort Crisis by
Hmm.
Michael Easter and they talk about this Japanese ritual called a misogi and it's gotten a little bit more popular like a couple people have kind of adjusted it to fit maybe like their approach or their interpretation. But basically, the Japanese ritual is you pick one year defining challenge so that when you look back on that year, you're like, oh yeah, that defined my year. Like I tried it. And Michael Easter's approach to it was you have to pick something that's like 50-50. Like you don't know if you'll be able to complete it.
Oh, I like that.
And then leading into it was you don't post about it on social media. Like it's
I,
for you. And then people have modified that where it's like you can post about it maybe like for me, I didn't post about it leading up to it. And
mhm.
afterwards it was more like I've posted like what I learned and my reflection and like shared that. But that was kind of the start of it. And then I looked into it last year, which was so 2022. I was looking into it and was by the time I was like, oh man, that would be sweet. That was like, there's no way I could prep in 6 or 7 weeks and then do it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do that in 2023, and that's going to be my Misogi. So then I started training a lot more in like February, and I mean, I would still like lift 3 times a week. I would train jiu-jitsu 2 to 3 times a week, and then I would just slowly ramp up my running from 3 days a week to 4 to running every single day. But around I mean, I signed up in, I'm pretty sure I signed up in January or February. I can't remember when I signed up, but I like made the agreement that I was doing it in February.
I love that.
Yeah. And it was actually one of the guys who paced me. He's the one who lives in Bend, Dirk Vanderveld. We agreed to do it. And the cool part was I actually had him on my podcast, and he was like, yeah, man, like he had run 2 ultras before. He ran the Cascade 100, but the race was a different course and it was a different time of the year. And then he
Okay.
ran a different one, Ure, out in, which is nuts. It took him like, it was like a 47-hour
That
race,
is
which is,
crazy.
yeah. So we agreed. I was like, all right, man, like I'll make the jump going from marathon to ultra.
Hmm.
And he was like, all right, deal, let's do it. I'll do it with you. And the cool part was I ended up signing up, and he was like, he ended up not making we just like didn't reconnect on like signing up and everything. And then he's like, oh, dude, I'll pace you. I got you. Like and it was really cool the way instead of us like both doing the race, it was like he'd already done it, and he was my pacer for the 27, which
Mm.
I'm super grateful. Like there was no one in the entire world who I'd rather have than that guy run. Like he helped me so much, but there's no one in the world that I would rather have run those 27 miles with me than him. So,
That 27 was pretty critical. I feel like for myself, it sounds like it was for
oh
you too.
yeah, that was the life-changing part of the race for sure.
What was your pacer interaction during that 27? Like, was it tough love or just motivation? How did you get through that night section?
Oh no, okay, so yeah, like Rory was my pacer for the first part, and then when we got to the 11 o'clock, that we left at like 11 o'clock, but for that 27, uh, I think I mean it was all love, to be honest. Like I had this weird thing during the race where I like couldn't breathe. I felt
Hmm.
like I was like hyperventilating. It was really weird. I'm not sure what it was, but there were a couple different spots in the race where I could only like breathe in for like 1 second, and then
That's
I could
crazy.
I would be it. Honestly, I've never had one, but I would during the race I was like, "That's probably what an asthma attack feels like."
Yeah,
Um,
I remember actually passing you a couple times, and you were telling me about that during the race.
yeah, I would
You were
because
like, I.
it started to get through to get through the night, it was all like love. Like one thing Dirk really helped me, he was like one step at a time, one breath at a time. Just
Mhm.
focus on like these big inhales. And I was like nasal breathing for the majority of the race, but I don't honestly I have no idea what it was, but like I would it would be like I would take a drink out of my like pack, and it was nuts because I would like that sense to like take a big deep breath in.
Oh yeah.
I would get that the second I tried to drink water. So I'd like try to, and then I'd go, like I'd be out of breath trying to drink water. I don't know what it was, but like it was super weird. But I had that like periodically through the race. So thank God Dirk was he was a lot more loving. He was like, dude, you just got to breathe, and then we can speed up. And then honestly, there was some tough love in there. Like we got to it said online that it was a 6 a.m. cutoff, but I think it was 5:30. It
Mhm.
was when you came down that gravel road, and then you cut over to the left, and it was right before you dropped into Peterson Ridge at the base of the mountains. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, and you had to be there by like 5:30 a.m. And I got there at 5 a.m. and I sat down, and the medic lady was like, "Are you all right?" Like, "Hey, we need to talk to this guy." Like she came up, and then my buddy Dirk's like, "He's good. We're standing up." And yeah, like I probably sat down for like 25 seconds, and he's like, "We got to go." And that was when it was that moment was when you had to do the 10.3 miles in 4 hours, and you had to make it to the 84-mile cutoff.
Mhm.
And that was like the next crew section. So that's where Dirk had some tough love. He'd be like, "You can sit down for 30 seconds. Like we got to go," and tell me pace. But no, it was, and then that's where we like repassed each other. But
Yeah,
Um,
right after the sun rose, I think,
yeah.
when it was getting like time critical, and
Oh yeah,
I think those cutoffs were getting closer and closer.
yeah, that part was crazy. Yeah, I would say, um,
Do you think you
yeah,
experienced all emotions on that race?
oh, brutal. I was gonna say, so yeah, like honestly going into like there was a spot where like I really started feeling good, and I think it was roughly when you got sick, but I didn't know that. You told me later.
Hmm.
But I started feeling good, and then there was that like 4 or 5 mile stretch. So like going through the race, it was that downhill going up to the first crew.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was feeling really good. And then I sat down and I was chilling, like catching up. My parents were there, and Rory met me at the first crew spot. And then when I came out of that, that was the first time in the race where I was like, oh man, like I think the sitting down actually like messed me up. Like the downhill kind of blew me up. And then I got to that hill where you like come out of the crew and it's flat, then you
Mm,
turn the corner. And that was when like my breathing started getting messed up. Do you remember that? It was
I
like the
do.
hill is lit.
It was flat coming out of that first cruise station. You did some like snake turns maybe, and
Yeah.
then it was just straight up
Yeah. The
for
hill
a
was
while.
yeah, like that was the where the emotions hit me at first because I was on that hill for like 2 hours by myself.
Mm,
I There was no one in front of me and no one behind me, and like everyone behind me dropped back, everyone in front of me sped up, and I literally was like, it. It was 2 hours, like, and then I was just having a ton of trouble. Like I went back and looked at my Garmin, and I was going at like 40 minute per mile pace. Like
yeah, that
it was
is
so
crazy.
bad. Yeah, and that was where I got like super emotional where I was like, "Oh my god, like I'm fucked. This is like this hill right now is the hardest thing I've ever done." And I when I'm done, that means I'm halfway. That's when I got like I never had it wasn't like I never thought like oh man, you're not going to be able to finish this. I just
Hmm.
was like, "Oh man, this is going to really hurt." Like this is where like shit's getting real because that was right when we were about like 12 hours into the race or like 16 hours of being awake. And then so I finally the two things, and then I want to hear about yours is I was going up that hill and I was just getting blown up and I was almost to the top and this dude passed me. He's just motoring by with the hiking poles and he's like, "Hey man, everybody cheers for the guy who runs it in 20 hours." And he's like, "Yeah, it's cool like when everybody cheers for the guy who wins, but everybody really cheers for the guy who gets it in 10 minutes before the cutoff." And I looked at him and was like, "What?" Like I didn't get what he was saying at first. He's like, "Have a good one, man." And he just motors
And
away.
just passed
And
you.
I was thinking about yeah, and then I was thinking about that for an hour and I was like, "What was he trying?" And I'm like, "I guess that's true. Like everyone's hyped up for the dude who's like, you got to hurry up. You got to hurry up." Which is crazy because I ended up finishing 11 minutes before the cutoff. But then the
I
last
love
part
that. Yeah.
was, yeah, the last part that was crazy was I made it to the aid station and at the top of that hill, which is the one we'd already went through it once,
Hmm.
and I sat down and was like, "Oh my god, like that hill just absolutely destroyed me." And I was probably sitting there for a minute, and then you rolled up,
I remember that.
and yeah, and you were like, "Oh, what's up, dude?" You're like, "Dude, I got sick." And I was like, "Oh, what?" Like, and you were like grabbing some stuff, and I was blown up. And then you're like, "All right, man, good to see you. I'm gonna go." And I was so blown up that I was like, I have to go with him, or like I'm not. So I was like, "Oh, dude, let's go." So I went with you, and I felt like crap from the hill, and I was having trouble breathing. But that you like you got me fired up. Like I was like, "Oh, finally somebody."
I do
Um,
remember that. I think I drank the other half of your soup right before
oh
right before
yeah.
we left. You're like,
Yeah, you were like,
I'm gonna throw this out, and I was like, oh, I think I need that right now.
yeah, because yeah, that hill messed me up, so I got like sick. Well, I didn't throw up, but um, that yeah, the 30, I think it's 37 ish, because the next crew was like 47
Hmm.
or 49. But the hill was probably the most emotional because I was like by myself, And then you go through the range of emotions, like when you run into the crew and like
For sure.
you're around your support system. But yeah, because like at the beginning of the race, you got sick, right?
I did. I expected not to feel great, but I think it was really early on, like maybe 16, 17. I ate something at that second aid station, which would have been like mile 16. And yeah, I just got sick and was honestly like throwing up. Couldn't keep anything down for a while. Even through that first crew aid station, which was 36. I think when I got to honestly 54, so from 16 to 54, when you picked up your pacer for like the 27-mile section, that was like the first time that I could keep something down. And
Damn.
my brain was kind of freaking out because I knew I was in a calorie deficit. I knew I was getting deeper and deeper in the hole, but my body just would not keep anything down. I
Hmm.
was I was getting behind on pace and just getting sick, but I guess that's part of it, right?
Yeah. What you got sick? Do you think it was from like going too fast, or it was just like you tried to eat too much, or what do you think that was?
You know, I think it was I was just started eating stuff that I had never practiced with. Like I was
Oh, gotcha.
pretty like religious and strict with my training diet, and I think in the end that actually was like a hindrance and
Hmm.
was a huge setback like during the race because I was eating like those spring energy gels, chips, like Fig Newtons, and they just like did not sit right.
Hmm.
Maybe it
I
was
w-
like partially excitement, but
yeah. Huh.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you
I
know
was.
the drink mix Infinite or Infinity. It's kind of
Mm-mm.
like a tailwind carb, high
Hmm.
carb like endurance drink mix, and I absolutely love it. I think it's incredible. But if you only train with that, you're you're kind of at a disadvantage come the day of.
Yeah. I know
So,
what you mean because I practiced with the nutrition wise. I would just like eat food before my
mm,
runs when I was like, not nothing crazy, but I would try to like there'd be a time I'd go pick up a burrito from like a Mexican place and I'd eat like half a burrito and then go do my run just to
I
like
love that.
be used to being like, oh man, this was kind of heavy. I didn't really like eating that. I mean, I love burritos, but wouldn't recommend it. But no, I know what you mean because it like especially when you're in that state where you're like, I need calories.
Hmm.
All that stuff looked good, but I basically only ate like probably the fruit, the pickles, and the PB and J's
Oh
at the
yeah,
beginning of the race, and then yeah,
yeah. I don't know why everything looked amazing, but I would just eat it and it would just not sit well.
yeah,
And
especially because you're motoring though, like your heart rate. It's like your heart rate's 130 for over 24 hours, which is not. Yeah,
yeah, I think like if I were to do another one, my nutrition would be something I would really really have to dial in.
hmm.
Probably do what
What?
you do, just eat eat whatever whenever and practice like gut training yourself through all that.
Yeah,
But
I don't know what because I used very similar to you, like the carb drinks. I used Element as my electrolytes, and then I
oh yeah.
used Morton gels and the Morton like carb drinks as mine. And so like I would pack those or but there were times like I've messed up my nutrition because like I honestly thought I brought this like little breakfast burrito to eat as like my lunch, and I took one bite of it and I like gave it to the woods. Like there was
Oh
no
yeah.
way I could eat. I like took one bite and was like, I can't do this. There's like this is gonna mess me up, and I had that in my pack. But
But
yeah,
it's kind of funny. Something that I didn't really realize was when you go on training runs, right? Maybe my longest training one was 5 6 hours, maybe 6.5. When you go on those runs and something's off, you don't bonk enough to where you don't finish it, right? Like
hmm,
you can still like push through. It might suck like a little bit more than it should, but 6 hours is still kind of doable. But when you're bonking for like that 6 hour mark on to like the 20-hour mark, then it's like, well, this is not what I expected at all.
yeah,
I really did need more calories. But
yeah. That was my saving grace at when you we rolled up to like Swampy Lakes. So it
Mm-hmm.
was after the hill, and you got your crew where they were like playing music and everybody was all set up. Like I think that was the 54 mark, or it was the 40.
49 maybe.
Yeah, it was the 49. Yeah, 49. That was where like I ate like chicken teriyaki and rice, and I could actually get like dinner in
That's
at that
crazy.
one. And yeah, my buddies, that was big for me because that hill just messed me up so bad. And then two of my buddies that were a part of my crew, I hadn't seen them yet. So they live in Bend. So I didn't see them the night before. I talked to them on the phone. And then we started the race. They weren't at the first crew. So it was actually helpful. They were like something to look forward to. I was like, oh, once I get to 49, I'll get to see like Dirk and Connor, which was sick. But yeah, what was that like for you getting to, it was like 57. So that was when you kind of had to like lock in because we were like running overnight. What was, you said that was the first time you could get like food in?
So I sat there for like 20 minutes, I think. A lot longer than I had planned for the different aid stations, but I had been in like a calorie deficit for pretty long at that point, to where, and you know how like the temperature was dropping.
Oh yeah, it got
I,
cold.
I was feeling like, first time in my entire life, I was feeling like my body couldn't regulate temperature. Like I
Mm,
was just like shivering, and it wasn't even really that cold at that point, but I was kind of like shivering, just sitting there. I think I drank like a Mountain Dew and got some like ramen in me. But I think that, like you were saying, like the hill for you is the hardest part of the race. I think like that decision to get up from that chair and venture out through the night, seeing
mm-hmm.
like what condition my body was in and like my mental state was in at that point, I think that was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life.
Dang.
I was like, this is going to be absolutely miserable. Like that
Yeah,
was the only thing like going through my mind. I was like, this is going to be absolutely miserable. Like
yeah,
I
because
am completely done
it,
right now.
yeah, and that was a big turning point because it's like the next crew is 27 miles.
Oh yeah,
So,
and you kind of just like leave like the comfort of your
oh yeah,
crew. It's pitch black. You're already like staring at a headlamp, and you just know like this is going to be the longest night of your entire life probably.
yeah, yeah, little context on that is because we were both roughly there at the same time, so it was like 10:30,
Yeah, you gave me a
and
fist bump before you headed out.
yeah, I dapped
Yeah,
you up. Well, no,
yeah,
it was
yeah.
no, that was when I actually got in right at that
Oh,
because
okay, okay.
my crew thought I was going to the wrong chair because they were like, no, 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 bro, and I was like, dude, keep killing it, and I gave you a
Yeah.
fist bump, and then I sat down and I stayed there for a while too because that so we started the race at 6 a.m. and then the crew was at 37 ish, which for me was like 3 o'clock, and then Swampy Lakes was the next one, which was like about 8 o'clock. So the sun was about to set.
Hmm.
And then 49 to 57. And then 57 was like 10:30 p.m. Is dark. And we
It
were
was
like working. Yeah, it was dark. And then we were working our way back up to it because we were at the base of Mount Bachelor. And that was kind of the beginning of the race where it starts to turn and you start working your way around Mount Bachelor and like towards Sisters and like Peterson Ridge. But yeah, that was a big jumping off point because you're like, all right, like if I commit to this, it's 27 miles.
it's crazy too because I knew pacers and crew were going to be important going into the race, just for like morale. But like humbly, I do not think I would not have finished if it wasn't for my pacers and my crew there. Like
Yeah. Did you?
they were like absolutely essential.
Yeah. Dude,
And that's not even me being humble. Like I probably would have just like walked off the trail and like taken a nap
yeah.
in the middle
Did
of
you
the
tell
night.
him? Have you told him that?
Oh yeah, I have. So the pacer for that section was actually my brother-in-law, like one of the absolute best guys I know, and I've told him that he's definitely like saved me through the night. I
Yeah.
Looking back on it, I still do not know how I made it through that night section, and would not have if it wasn't for him just keeping me going.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a big commitment by him. Like that was something that I kind of felt bad about, or not felt bad, but I was just so appreciative when my buddy Dirk was like, "Oh, I'll run the 27 with you."
Mm-hmm.
And because then I even emailed the race people because they're like, "Oh no, like if you have a pacer for that spot, they have to go all the way through."
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like such a big, yeah, it's like they paced a marathon.
Yeah,
They
yeah. We were both getting distance PRs that night,
Hmm. Yeah, it's,
but
what was that like leaving that? Like where was your mental state at? Like what were you saying to yourself leaving that aid station?
so that's when I did get like pretty internal. That 27 hour or 27 mile section was like the hardest and most rewarding part of the race. Right, it started off pretty low, leaving that, and then I'm not sure what your mantras were, but I started repeating like one of mine to myself, which was, people don't really care what you want; they only care what you earn. You
Mm,
know, and I was like, even to yourself, everyone talks nowadays. I feel like
hmm
everyone has like great ideas and they post stuff on social media, and which is fine if, in my opinion, if you actually do the thing you're talking about. But I find more often than not, people get like satisfaction out of just talking about achieving something. You posted something the other day. It's like thinking about doing the thing is not doing the
Oh,
thing, and that was
dude,
Chris.
yeah,
That was Chris who said that, right?
Chris Williamson, yeah, the
Yeah,
podcaster.
yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that because he put like my feeling about all that stuff into words, and
Hmm.
I think too many people, in my opinion, just talk about doing the thing and don't actually do the thing. And
Yeah.
through that night, I was just like, yeah, I literally have to do this. Like I've committed too much time to training. There's I don't know if you feel this way, but there's like positive and negative um, forces that kind of propel you to reach the same goal, or that'll like bring you to the same outcome.
Yeah. It's like light motivation and dark motivation.
Okay. So one's negative, but it'll still help you finish, and the other
Mhm.
one's positive and will still help you finish. I think this is really funny, but like a dark motivation was prior to the race. I bought like the hoodie, like the Oregon Cascades hoodie,
Hell
and
yeah.
I don't know why I got fixated on it, but I was like, I'm gonna have to burn this hoodie if I don't finish.
Oh,
Like I'm gonna have to destroy this hoodie. There's no way I can keep this thing if I don't
yeah.
finish the race. Which is funny now, but I was like, why would I spend money on this thing? And then the light motivation was like, I want to be like a man of action, right? Like I don't want to just like talk or think about something. Like I want to actually do it.
Hmm.
So I think that was huge for me. But
Yeah, the doing the thing.
mhm.
It's like an essay from, I don't know. It's a Twitter account called Strangest Loops, but yeah, it's like writing a tweet about doing the thing is not doing the thing, and then
Mm.
yeah, I've been loving that. That's actually, uh, you just made me think about this, but like leading up to the race, I like, uh, I had a really hard time talking about it to
Oh, I
anyone.
did too.
Like,
I did too. I was
like a
like secretive about it.
Yeah, like people, I'd talk to like some people, but especially when we got like 4 weeks out, I did not talk about it at all
That's
because,
that's so weird. I didn't know if it was like a weird personal thing that I had going on. I couldn't really figure it out, but it's kind of cool that you felt similar.
yeah, because people were so pumped when I did talk about it. They were like, "Oh, no way!" They're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, that's so sick," and I just did not want that dopamine kick of like,
Oh yeah,
when it's like when you tell someone your goal, you get a little dopamine kick because it
for sure.
feels like you're
Feels
doing the
good.
thing.
Yeah, it feels
Yeah,
good. Like that
and
that praise feels good.
yeah, and not gonna lie, like like it was really weird. Something I learned from the race was like I believed I could do it before I had the ability to do it. It
Mm,
was like I knew I knew I had a really good chance. It wasn't a guarantee. Like I was like, yeah, this is going to be really challenging. But I like deep down was like, I know. At least my inner monologue was like, I know I can do this before I started doing all the training during the summer and before I got into it. And like during the race, there were a lot of times where I was like, oh shit, like, oh shoot, like I don't know what's gonna happen because I know I can do it, but it doesn't look like I'm doing it right now.
yeah.
And but yeah, I got super nervous, like not super nervous. It just like secretive. Like I was like, I just can't. I don't want to talk about it.
Well,
And
it kind of sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, go go go.
it kind of made me angry when people would gas you up, hype you up beforehand. Like when they if they found out that you were doing it, they're like, "Oh, that's sick, man! Like, congrats!" Or like that's so badass. So you're gonna that like you're doing that. And inside, it used to like tear me up. I was like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I don't deserve any of that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even deserve it after the fact, but I definitely don't do it now. Like deserve it now. I haven't even remotely began to accomplish the thing, right?
Yeah, it was. You just. It was actually really cool because a lot of my friends that I did tell, I don't know if they just like read the situation,
Mm,
but it was just like this calm, like you got this, dude,
mm,
and like
I love that.
that was really I looking back on it, I don't know how they knew that that's what I needed, but like my best friend Mike, he wasn't able to come to the race, but he flew down from Seattle and hung out with me the few days before the race.
Oh, cool.
And we just kind of like hung out and like talked about the race a little bit, but like honestly we didn't really go over anything. And it was just like that. I think that was the most helpful for me. I know there was one part where I was like saying a bunch of my friends' name on the hill. I was like saying
Hmm.
a bunch of my friends' names out loud because I was like, "Come on, we got this." Because I was like by myself, and I was just thinking about a lot of the people that, like Brad Scott, one of my friends and coaches, and someone I really look up to. He called me on the way there on the phone, and he it was like right before he walked into he works for the Atlanta Braves, so he's like walking into the baseball stadium, and he's like, dude, I had to call you before, like you got this, man. And it was like there, I don't know, you just made me realize that, but it was like there was like a calm, like you got this, instead of like, oh, or like a lot of the student athletes, especially the cross country guys, knew I was running, and they were like, "You're a psycho." And it was just like they came by the office, just like give me a hug and say, like, you got this."
Yeah,
And
I love
that
that.
I think that was like I just got yeah. When people got overhyped, I was like, "Oh no, no, no!" Like I haven't even done it yet, and I don't. It's like, yeah, not to get on a rant on that, but
No, no, that's good. What you were saying there was like some key people in your mind. Were those key people in your mind because you care about your perception, their perception of you? Does that make sense?
yeah, I
Like
don't.
you
I
know you
wasn't
didn't.
necessarily.
Yeah,
Or go, you can finish.
those key people that you were thinking about were you thinking about them because you knew they were rooting you on, or like
Yeah, just
you didn't want to let them down?
mm, not so much let them down. I just
Mm,
know that when there's times when I second guess myself, there's like a big chunk of people that they sometimes believe in me more than I believe in myself.
oof.
And I tell them that. Like and I mean my best friend Mike, I just yeah, as a joke, I was like, I can't call this dude and tell him I didn't finish. And like but not in like a negative way, but I was just like, oh man. Like I remember when I ran my marathon, the first thing he asked me back in 2019, he was like, "Did you walk?" He's like, do you think you could go any faster?" And I was like, no. And it's like in that race, I knew he was gonna ask me that, so I just kept going. But no, honestly, like all the people I thought of, they're all just like I'm like they believe in me so much,
Mm.
especially at the times when maybe I don't fully believe in myself. Um, Not so much like, oh man, don't let them down. It was just like, yo, they know you can do it too. So like
That's
let's
cool.
roll. So that was really big. And then yeah, that the dopamine thing is it's so true.
That is.
Hmm. What it what was it did those mantras change at all? Like you said, so you left the um what is it, the 11 p.m. So you started your 27 miles. So roughly we're looking at like you're running from 11 p.m. to basically the next big cruise station was 9:30 in the morning.
Oh
Did you just
yeah.
like hold on to that mantra and then like go cooking through the night?
Um, so actually, as soon as I got my appetite back, my knees kind of gave out completely, and I think that was probably like lack of training properly on downhill. And like the last third of the race is pretty much all downhill.
Hmm.
So I was getting like pretty frustrated that I was feeling better physically at that time, but now my knees were starting to give out. So that was actually probably the time period where I had like the most doubt in my mind, and almost like at the turning point, or when I was getting pretty low. I remember my brother-in-law said to me, like, "Hey, I'm just gonna be straight up with you. Like, unless you start moving right now, you're not gonna make it."
Hmm.
And I think that's when something inside my mind like clicked, and I was just like, yeah, I didn't come this far to only come this far. So then it kind of shifted from, well, you better earn it, like it's not enough just to want to finish this. Like you have to earn it. To, yeah, don't let everything be in vain. Like you've suffered enough, you can go farther. And that's when I really started believing, like, okay, you can do it now. Like
Oh,
just
that's
get a little more miserable, push a little
yeah.
harder, like suck it up for a little more. It's only, you're more than halfway done, so just go for it. And
Yeah, that's so sweet. That
yeah.
was actually my mantra for the whole race
Mm.
was I didn't come this far just to come this far. That
It's funny how those mantras, they might seem corny and stuff when you're thinking about them, but when you're in the thick of it, it is nice to rely on some sort of thought that really means something to you.
yeah, that's all I could think about. Like I would say that out loud and then
Mm.
it'd be like, all right, just get your breath back. Like I would like maybe stop for a sec, try to get like my breathing back in a groove, and I would just anytime it sucked, I was like, dude, you did not come this far. Just stop right now.
I love
But
that. I was also thinking, this is kind of like a mantra I learned from one of, I would say, like my only like ultra running mentor, a guy I work with. He told me just to do a simple mental checklist of one thing, like, are you
hmm,
still moving forward? And he
hmm,
said that like mantra helped him out a lot in his ultras. And I remember actually like adopting that during that like time period. I was like, yeah, I'm still moving forward. Like, okay, if you endured the last step, you endured this one, you can endure the next one.
yeah, yeah. It's
So
like, cool. Are you moving? Yes. All right.
yeah,
Sick.
okay,
Then keep moving.
that's all
Yeah.
you have to do, really. You all
Yeah.
you have to do is keep moving.
During
So
those during those lows at night, did you hallucinate at all?
I didn't hallucinate. My I felt like my vision was like really weird though.
Hmm.
I think just like staring at the ground, like at a bright headlamp for so long, and then your peripherals are just pitch black. It kind of made my vision like almost delayed, kind of. But no like hallucinations. No. Did anything weird happen for you?
For me, it was like the grass was like holographic, like on the edges of the trail. Like it was like it looked way more like 3D and like shiny.
Oh,
And I think
cool.
that is like what you said. It's like you have these blinders on because you're just
Hmm.
like I looked up every once in a while. I'd like want to look at the stars because it was like a
Oh,
clear night,
they were
and
so beautiful.
I was in like such a bad spot that I like barely did that.
Oh, okay.
And but yeah, it's like your peripherals are black. All you can see is this trail, and then there were just a couple times where like there was one where we almost stepped on a frog like on the trail, and then for like the next like I don't know how long, but I would see these rocks, and for like a second I would think it's a frog, and then I'd be like, oh dumbass, like that's a rock, like take it easy. And then there were a couple where there'd be like a downed tree that when your headlamp hits it, it's white. And I would, for maybe like 2 or 3 seconds, I thought it was an aid station tent,
Oh,
and I was
you
like, no way.
got.
And
We're here.
my buddy is like, dude, we just left one like a mile ago. What are you doing? And so nothing bad. It just I would catch myself like it'd be like 3 or 4 seconds worth, and on the fifth second I'd be like, idiot, like what are you doing, bro? Like keep running. So
Yeah.
it was nothing that crazy. But what was it like for you when the sun came up? Where were you at, and what was your mindset like there?
Um, sun came up. I was pretty pumped, but I don't know if you remember the trail during that time, like when you're coming over the ridge down into Sisters. It was pretty rocky.
It was all rocks, and it was
And,
all those burnt dead trees.
yeah, and like loose rocks too.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, at that time period, I broke one of my hiking poles just because I tripped and got it caught in something, and
Oh.
then I tripped again, and I like fell into the bushes, and then like I tripped a third time, and like kind of like blew up my knee a little bit, and then I just remember for like an hour I was just pissed,
Mhm.
like like the sun was coming up, it was absolutely beautiful, and I was just like angry
Mhm.
that the trail was like this.
I
But
think yeah, I think I caught up to you at that point because you slowed down when you messed up your knee,
yeah.
and then you guys asked if we had like athletic tape or anything, and then later on it was like a couple miles ahead, you guys were cooking, and like you gained a lot more speed and you passed me going into that 9:30 cutoff. But yeah, that part of the trail was right when my so when we left this that last aid station at like 5:15 in the morning. My headlamp actually died right
Oh,
as the sun was coming up because I was like, "Yo, Dirk, my headlamp's coming out or going out," and he's like, "You're good, don't worry about it." Like, look, and you look, and the sunrise was like how beautiful was that sunrise? It was like bright red. It
it
was
was
like kind
so
of
pretty.
fluffy. Yeah,
Oh
it
yeah.
was like to your right was the sunrise, bright red, like skies on fire with like black, like small little clouds, and then on the left side were the sisters, the three
Yeah,
mountains. They're massive, and we're like right at the base of them.
it was probably like the best view on the entire course of those three mountains, and it just so happened to like coincide with like the sun rising. It was magical.
Yeah, that something when I got to that point. So that I would say the hill was the hardest when I was by myself, but
Mm-hmm.
by far the worst was the 10.3.
Oh
So
yeah.
the 10.3 miles where we went aid station, right where all there's like that loose rock, and then you get to that cutoff. You if you don't make it by 9:30, it's over. Where we were
Yeah.
kind of going back and forth. That was the worst part of the race for me by far
Mm.
because that was when it was like 24 hours we'd been awake. And I just remember looking up when my headlamp died, and I was like, I can't. I've summited that mountain before, like a couple years before. I was like, holy shit! And then we were motoring, but Dirk, my pacer, was in the same boat as what you said about your brother-in-law. He's like, hey man, like he's being super supportive and like pushing me. He's like, hey man, at this pace, like we're not gonna make it if you keep going like this. And that was right when my shin started hurting. My
Oh,
left shin was like destroyed, and it was like, all right, we got 30 miles left, and my shin is like swollen. Like I had like a legit like bump on my shin where
had
that was
had
yeah
that
that was
returned to normal post race?
oh yeah actually. So I had a so post race after I finished, it was big because once I made it to that 9:30, I'd never used poles before, and
Mm-hmm.
we had poles, so I'd offset the weight on my left leg. But I was on crutches in like a boot for 2.5 weeks, and after the race, like the week after, my left leg was below my knee was so swollen, like my foot, I couldn't even get a sock on,
Oh
and
my gosh.
I had like a stress reaction, like not a stress fracture, but I think I messed something up with like my anterior tib, the muscle, just from being plantar flexed.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're like toes down running downhill,
Oh
where
yeah.
I don't, and then my shin. like Rory tried to help take my socks off. We were gonna switch my socks, and I was like, dude, you can't even touch it. Like it hurts so. Like I couldn't even put my feet up on a chair because it felt like my shin was like going like this.
Gonna absolutely
And
snap.
yeah, and I was like, dude, I just need you to dump the rocks out of my shoe and put my shoe back on. Like I can't switch socks. It hurts too bad. Um, that was when. And then after the race, it was kind of funny. My health insurance like took so long. It was like 7 weeks to get an MRI. Like I got an X-ray and it was fine. So more than likely it was just a stress reaction, which I'm back to running now. But yeah, they were like, "Oh, we'll get you in," and I'm like, I'll probably be better by then, hopefully. So it wasn't too crazy.
Yeah, I tried to post race. I tried to schedule like a PT appointment for my knees,
Yeah.
and I actually just went yesterday. It was the first
Oh,
time I
what?
got in,
That's
but
crazy.
by now your knees are feeling better and everything like that. But I'm so glad I went and got them checked out.
Yeah. There was I think that stint right before that 9:30 cutoff was probably my most emotional part where I just got super sad that I was like, oh man, like there's a chance they're gonna try to stop me.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're gonna be like, hey man, like you're done. Sorry, there was a cutoff. And I remember Dirk. I don't like really drink soda, and he gave me like a sip of Coca Cola, and then I had one of those Morton gels that had like caffeine in it, and I was like going side to side, like all those bushes on the side. Like I felt like I was gonna fall into those, and I was just like, wow, this is so depressing. Like I'm not gonna make it to this 9:30 cutoff, and like I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying so hard, but we're not going. And I got the like Coca Cola, the caffeine gel, and then Dirk was playing. We both like Russ, the rapper, and he just
Mm-hmm.
came out with a new album. And Dirk played 3 songs on his phone, and that was like the only music I listened to because I didn't wear headphones. And yeah, it was just so bad. And then I was like, well, I'm just gonna run on my shin. Like it already hurts, so if I get a stress fracture or I blow it up, like it's
It's
like I'm
worth it at this
closer.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's closer to blowing up than it is being normal. So, and then we ended up speeding up, and I made it there by like 9:05, and that I was so happy to see the crew. But yeah, 84. You'd mentioned like what what hit you at mile 84.
84 is when I really for the first time believed that I could do it. My pacer Ethan, told me like I needed to pick it up. Picked it up, went into that crew aid station on just like the absolute high of the race. I think 84 was like the highest I've ever been. Right? I had like my sister doing like calculations of like minute per mile pace that I needed to make, and at that point it was like, okay, 20-minute miles, and I was like, okay, I can walk that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw my wife, saw my parents, and it was just like such a high. And I remember thinking like, okay, I can do this. And that was like the first time during the whole race where I think I actually, honestly, the first like throughout the first time in the whole like training process, I really 100% believed like I can do this.
Hmm.
So
Did
that
you?
no, go
I
ahead.
was just I was just gonna say, did you? What was it like with your crew? Like, were you talking to them at 84 where you're like, yo, I can do this? Like,
Yeah,
or were you quiet and they were the ones talking?
no. When I got into 84, I think I was just like pumped, like super hyped, and like energy was up because the last time you saw your crew was mile 54 before
Hmm.
you like went into the night, and
Yeah, you
that was
said good
like
night.
yeah, that was like the worst physical condition I think I've ever been in was mile 54. So there was a lot of unknown since the last time I saw them.
Hmm.
So just to see them, and I was like, I think I jogged into that aid station, and everyone was just so pumped. It was high energy at that aid station leaving. So
That's awesome.
I just
Yeah,
like
because
rode
then
rode that high out for the rest of the race.
yeah, because leaving that aid station, you like bomb up that gravel road, and then you'd like
Mm-hmm.
turn right into the woods, and then you just ride Peterson Ridge like all the way down
Oh yeah.
to that's sick. Yeah, what did going into that last little bit, like did you have any tactics or like did the mantra change or
Honestly, it was um, just keep walking.
yeah.
Like don't try to do anything crazy right now. Like just keep walking and you'll make it. And then as soon as you started hitting like single digit miles, like my energy was just like climbing from there. I was like, oh, let's go. Like now we got 9 miles left, 8 miles left. So it was kind of just like just one foot in front of the other, just try to. And to be honest, I was just power hiking that last
Yeah.
like 15 miles. So
Did you know you had it?
I did. Especially like when we got into like mile 95, maybe like that very last aid station.
Yeah,
I
that straight gravel road.
Oh yeah. I picked up my wife actually paced me for the last like 2.5, 3 miles,
Hmm.
and I think that was the most emotional time of the race. Because I mean, at least for me, I was so fortunate to have someone in my corner like the entire training process that kind of like you said, like people that believe in you when you don't believe in yourself, right? And for me, that was my wife, hands down. Like at times, I think she was probably more invested in this race than I
Yeah,
was. So
that's so cool.
I picked her up, and it was cool because she's not a runner, and she like trained up to jog with me like the last like couple miles. So it was really special to finish that with her, like my number one like supporter throughout the entire process. And yeah, I remember like leaving that aid station is when honestly like that should have been like the finish line for me. I got more emotional like leaving on that last like 3 mile section than I did crossing the finish line, because at like mile 96, I think you had like, I don't know, like an hour and a half or something.
Yeah,
Something.
you had an hour. So the last aid station, I remember this because you had to be there by 1 o'clock,
Mm.
and I got there at 12:57, and so I had 3 minutes to spare in
Oh, that's
getting there.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you have 1 hour to walk 2.5 miles.
2.5 miles. Okay. Yeah.
So it's like it's in the bag once you
You
get
kind of
there.
have it in the bag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember just like left that aid station, and I was like, oh my gosh, like we did it, like
Yeah,
it.
were you talking a lot like the last 2.5 with her?
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like all like the pain went away, like you're not tired anymore. As
Hmm.
soon as you like really really know you have it in the bag, you're just like kind of just like super hyped, very reflective. And I don't know, I was kind of in like disbelief. I was like, wow, it can be done.
Hmm.
So it
Yeah.
was pretty
It's
it was a fun time, fun.
you, you'd mentioned like you wrote it in your show notes, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially being 2 months post. But it was like that magic or like that.
Mm.
It's that like undescribable feeling that it probably like I'm guessing it hit you at 84, and then you also get it at the end of the race. Like what is that besides belief?
I'm trying to figure out what that is too. It For me, that type of magic I tie to things that I think are impossible for myself. I don't necessarily tie that magic. I feel like I tend to have more belief in other people. Like if someone else told me like, oh, I'm gonna run 100 mile, I would have 100% like believed them from the very beginning. But for me, it's like I don't know if that's possible for me. I know it's possible for everybody else. So why can't it be possible for yourself? And I think that magic is tied with the unknown, right? Like the impossible things in life do carry some sort of excitement and magic. If you thought everything was possible, it kind of wouldn't really be worth the adventure almost.
Yeah, 100%. I can relate to that so much. Like
Okay.
yeah, just hyping people. It's something I've been thinking about where like my friends will be doing stuff and I'm like, oh, dude, you're killing it. Like you're crushing it. in like any project. And then like recently one of my friends texted me, he's like, dude, you're killing it. And I was like, oh yeah, you know.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like, but it's like that's the mindset that probably like pushed you to train for it, you know. It's like having that mindset is what pushes you to continue to be better and better and better, because you're like, oh, I'm not killing it, like I got to do more.
Oh
um
yeah, you know, like the path of like personal growth. I feel like you are always going to feel like that for your entire life
yeah,
in every aspect. You know, there's always more you could be doing, and even if you don't think there is, you don't know what you don't know. So you're like, well, what don't I know? Let me figure something else out. And I think like post race, like how have you been feeling about like just the accomplishment in general?
hmm. Well, I would say great question. I would say the end of my race was very different than yours.
Okay.
And one one thing that like I think it's like it was a sick ending and I'm super grateful. But I definitely didn't get to enjoy the end of the race as
Mm.
much as I wish I would have, because I was like in a bad spot in regards to, like, I was in a hurry. Um I felt like I was moving so fast, but I don't really know what. um I did enjoy the process of it, but when I got to 84, I was so messed up. And when I got to 84, I knew if I made it to 84, I would finish the race. And I got poles. I like smashed an energy drink. Like the only thing I could eat were oranges and pickles. And then my crew was like, "You get 2 minutes to sit down because you have to go. Like you're not gonna." Like I got there at 9:10, and the cutoff was 9:30, and
Hmm.
then I made the 11:30 cutoff at 11:28,
Oh my gosh.
and my watch had died, so we were using my phone, Strava, to track it, and I was with Connor, and we were doing great. Honestly, we were motoring, and then it was weird because they didn't that 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 cutoff wasn't on the thing. Like it wasn't on the
On the schedule.
schedule. So then when
Hmm.
we got there, they were like, "Nice, you made it with 2 minutes to spare," and we were like, "What?" And we just thought we had the 1 o'clock one. So
Yeah.
then, so then we like started motoring, and I was actually doing like 14-minute pace, and then we started this thing where like I would use the poles, and we would go nice and easy for 60 reps, and then I would like my like lats were sore after the race because I was using my arms so much because my left leg was so swollen, and we were just pushing it, and there was this woman and I think her husband or boyfriend or whatever was pacing her, and we were like 3 feet behind her, and my buddy was like, they're going at perfect pace just to stay on them, and like we never got farther back than like 20 feet. And it was cool because I didn't really realize this. There was like, I didn't notice, but my pacer was like texting the crew to give them like get ideas of like where they are, when they're going to be set up. So we knew once we got to that gravel road, it was about maybe half a mile to that aid station. So we
Hmm.
were just trying to get there. And then I remember before you cross the bridge, my dad and Rory were like on one side, and then my mom was on one side, and they were like cheering, and they were kind of like jogging. Like my dad was running, which like he doesn't run. He's like in his 70s, and he was like running behind us, like making sure we had stuff. And then we got to the aid station, and like 2 minutes, they just said you had to be there by 1 o'clock. So that was the other weird part. Like some of the aid stations, you had to leave by a certain time, and other
That's
ones you had to
right.
be there by a certain time. So you had to be there by 1. I got there at like 58, and yeah, just like finishing the race, I was like just in like a rush. Like it was cool. RC, he's the longtime track coach here at the University of Portland, and he he's just a man. But he texted um Connor during it, and Connor was like, "Yo, RC just texted like this is the fun part. Like you got it." And we were just like pressing because I was really nervous about the cutoff, and that was when like I stopped. The one thing I did notice was I stopped sweating, and I was like getting super hot. So then I was like dumping water on me, but because by that point for me it was like 85 degrees out that day, and that that last 2.5, I knew I had it in the bag,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just so hot because it was direct sunlight.
Oh yeah.
So I was cooked. But yeah, like I
Right when
guess
I
coming back to what or you go for it, and then
oh no no, no.
I got my train of thought.
I remember finishing and then taking off my shoes and whatnot, sitting, and you were such a big part of my race that I remember thinking like, okay, we have to stay here till the end. I need to. He's got to be coming. Like Bryan's
Oh,
got to be
let's
like
go.
right behind me. And as soon as you like passed and you started making like your lap around the track, I was just so stoked for you. I was
Yeah.
like, yes, let's
Oh, dude,
go.
I got teary-eyed seeing you, dude. It was funny because we were rolling up, and I said to Connor, I go, "Oh man, I hope they don't make us do the lap around the track like Western States." And then Rory's like, his brother that helped run with me. He's like, "Dude, you just got 400 meters," and I was like, "Shut up, are you serious?" And he's like, "Why are you getting mad at me, dude?" Like, I thought he heard me say I didn't want to do that. And I thought he was just messing with me. And then we turn it, and I'm like, oh man, 400 meters. And so we got there, and I knew I'd finish. I'm like, I'm walking this. Like, I'm not, I was blown up by then. But yeah, that was super cool. Like, dapping you up and like being able to say what's up after the race. Cause what I was going to say to your long winded answer on your question was the end of my race. Looking back, I guess that's the one thing. Like, it would have been way more fun to soak it in,
Mm.
but I finished, said what's up to you, and then I got the shivers, like I could not stop shivering, and I was like
Look,
freezing. And I asked Rory, I was like, dude, can you help me get in the sun? I'm super cold. And he's like, oh yeah, for sure. And he like put me in the chair in the sun, and then he's like, I got to go ask the medic tent. Like, dude, you're not sweating. Like, so then the medic tent ended up this is like it's kind of lame, but it's also cool, I guess. But the medic tent ended up being like, oh shit, like this dude's got almost like not heat stroke, but heat exhaustion.
oh
So
yeah.
they like took me in the medic tent, like put a bunch of ice packs like in my armpits, and then they ended up calling the ambulance.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't know if you were there. I don't really know who was all there. But so my buddies, I'm like, oh, like, let me sit down for a sec and then I'll dap you guys all up and we can take a picture with my parents and everybody. But then I was like so overheated that they took me in the medic tent and then they called the ambulance. And the paramedic guy is like the coolest person I've ever met. And he's like, hey, man, like, we're going to give you an IV. We're going to run your vitals. If everything's chill, we're going to let you go home. But if something's bad, we're probably going to have to take you to the hospital, but it's up to you. And then I had a 101.8 fever.
Oh man.
And I just remember he was like helping me out. And I was like, dude, I promise I'm listening. But man, this stretcher is like the most comfortable thing I've ever laid on. and, and, and they were like, how you feeling? Like, you okay? Like, we know you're not feeling great, but like heat exhaustion, how you feeling? And I was like, oh, honestly, like I just am really cold. And they like put some ice packs, like some mist sprayed me, and then turned the air conditioning on, and my temperature dropped like really like pretty quickly. And they ran all my vitals, and they were like, dude, you're hydrated, like your electrolytes look good,
Oh,
like you
awesome.
just need to chill, blah blah blah. And then like 20 minutes after, they like let me get out and helped me get in my parents' car, and they drove me back. But I just remember driving back, and I couldn't believe I was finished, and I was just blown up. And I was like, oh man, like we didn't take any pictures. Like it was my mom actually took a picture of us like dapping it up. Like I gotta send you that.
Oh yeah.
And but I just remember, and a couple weeks after, like the Connor and Rory. So Dirk wasn't at the end because was like he was crushed from the 27 miles. But Connor and Rory were just like, I hope you're okay. Like call us later. And they just
Oh
drove
yeah.
back to Bend. So I would say that was like my big thing where I was like, oh, it would have been cool to like get a group pic and all that, but it just adds to the story. And I was fine. Like I was, I mean, if I probably went for another hour, I probably wouldn't have been okay. But
Hmm.
that part was like, oh, that was ridiculous. Like,
Yeah, that ending is crazy. Now I
yeah,
understand why you couldn't take it all in.
yeah. Because so my like the guy gave me the paramedic gave me 2 IVs, and I felt great after that. Like, um, which I was pumped my hydration and everything was okay. I just was like super. I was at the point where like I wasn't regulating my body temperature. So I got back, showered. I like slept for 2 hours, woke up, ate a burger, couldn't eat anything else. It just like did not sound good. And then I slept for 12 hours.
I love that.
Yeah. So that was the end of the race. But what, what about, what about for you? Like I guess 8 weeks ago, like what has that process been like these past 8 weeks?
Um, you know, it doesn't seem, it doesn't hold the weight that it held in training anymore for some reason. And I think that's because now that I know that it's possible, like a little of that magic has disappeared from it. I think, and I'm only talking about for me personally for a 31-hour 100, right? Like 28-hour 100 now holds that magic, or like a 150-mile race holds that magic. But I think like the build up, I think this is the first thing I've ever done where the build up and the actual process was more important than the finish. And that was kind of cool because that's what I was hoping going into it. It's still cool, but it doesn't seem impossible anymore. And I'm already thinking about the next thing that I can chase that feels like that physically or in another aspect of life. But still absolutely stoked that I did it, and we'll get to have that for my whole life.
Yeah.
But
Does it ever not feel real?
it doesn't feel real. It really doesn't feel real. If you told me that I ran 100 like 8 weeks ago, I'd be like, no way, no, I didn't. But
Do
it,
you
it
ever,
it it has been fun reflecting on the whole process and just the time that I put into a singular goal, and everyone that I got to share like the training process with, and like the actual like 2.5 days, 3 days, have being able to have that experience with like my family and my friends. I think that's more important and more special to me than actually like doing the 100. I'm still just overwhelmed that they took time out of their lives, spent money to just come support me on a very singular, specific, goal that they didn't have to do that.
mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, does it ever go in waves of like sometimes it doesn't feel real and then other times you're like, well, I ran 100 miles, like I could definitely do this.
oh yeah, I think that's probably like one of the biggest takeaways for me personally was just anything, your day-to-day life, you know just chores you have to get done, or something that you want to accomplish. I think i think you get to that point where you're like, oh, I don't really want to do this, or I'm kind of tired right now, I'll push that off for tomorrow, or I'll push that off until tomorrow. And then I do consciously think, I'm like, no, I mean, like, I was way more messed up, way more tired, and I pushed myself for like 20 more hours. Like, I think I can get this done right now. Like, I think I can work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
So
I
it
noticed
has been kind of cool to fall back on that aspect of it.
yeah, I notice for me it's like I'll ask like why does this feel harder than running 100 miles
Oh,
on
that's
stuff?
cool.
Like
That's
like I just moved, so like packing up my apartment, it was just like getting annoying. Like
mhm.
cleaning up stuff or like I'm like, why do I have so much like Tupperware or something? Like, why didn't I get rid of this sooner? Like random stuff like, and then I was like, why does this feel harder than running 100 miles? And you're like, it's not. Like, dude, chill out.
I know,
Like,
chill out, just put your head down, keep grinding. I I
yeah,
I, I do resonate with that a lot.
were there any other takeaways from like reflecting that you were like, I'm putting this into my life right now?
Um, I think now, because it was such a big goal for myself, I think I think I will carry it forward. And now, like, when someone else doesn't really have belief in themselves, or like future kids or family, loved ones, if they don't really believe they can do something now, I feel like when I encourage them or motivate them, I feel like I have more like grounding kind of, or I'll believe it more when I encourage them. It won't just be like almost like superficial encouragement, but I'll be like, no,
Hmm.
you can do this. Like I now believe in people achieving very hard things, whereas before I didn't really believe that. So now I'm like, yeah, rock on, you guys can kill this. Let me know what you need, from me, and I'll be there every step of the way to like root you on.
Hmm. I
So,
love that how you said you felt like you learned more from the training process and like
mhm.
the process of leading up to it versus yeah, it is funny. Like you don't learn anything from the finish. Like the
Oh
400
right.
meters on the track, it's like there's no learning in that. You're just like, oh, I finished. Like it's over. It's all the it's all the learnings from the training process. Hmm.
But I mean, I've heard people say that before, but I don't think I ever really believed it, right? Like the, like the journey is the destination, like that type of quote, right? But
Yeah.
I do feel like, I mean, during the race, I was like, no, I didn't put a year and a half of training into something just for like this to be in vain.
Hmm.
And I think I also saw the value of long-term disciplined goals that is the complete opposite of instant gratification. Like that was like the first like really like personal long-term goal I had, where it was over the scope of even like 2 or 3 months. Like it was like a year and a half of like grinding and thinking about this and dedicating like time towards it. And I think I found the value of that. I think more people should go for something long term, where it's
Hmm.
not like super instant. But
Hmm. Yeah. What happened a year and a half ago that you were like, I'm committing to this?
a year and a half ago, there were actually like pretty specific things that led me to want to try to run a 100. And I think I had developed some pretty bad habits in my life. I was like vaping, smoking, dipping, and what started casual and like kind of fun now became like an actual addiction. And I was like, yeah, I'm addicted to nicotine, right? Which
Yeah.
is isn't the end of the world unless you like are thinking 1, 5, 10 years in the future. And you're like, well, I didn't intend, like, when my habit started, I didn't intend for it to be a lifelong goal. And it was funny. I think I honestly did not enjoy running at all, but I found
Hmm.
that it was like the one thing that would kick my cravings and like level out my mood and like kind of like
No way.
relax me in the like quitting process, because I had tried to quit like, I don't know, like probably a dozen times, and kind of always fell back onto those old habits. And and yeah, I just found like running was like the one thing that kind of like kicked those cravings. And I remember just like running and training for a marathon at first, and opening up to my good friend about like the struggle of like quitting, like nicotine and tobacco. And he said like, well, what are you going to do after you run the marathon? And I
Hmm.
was like, oh geez, like I don't know, I guess I'm going to have to like train for something farther. So I,
Yeah.
I ran the marathon, and then I was like, well, I have to keep this going if I want to like break the habit of smoking. So then I ran a 50, and and I remember like talking to him, and I was like, dude, I think I'm gonna have to keep running. Like I have to keep running for like myself. So that's when it was like during COVID. I watched like a documentary on Courtney Dauwalter,
Hmm.
and everything was kind of like a perfect alignment, you know, like I really wanted to quit smoking. I watched a documentary on her, and I was like, wow, that seems impossible. Like that is absolutely crazy. And I just like loved the idea of that. I've always wanted, I always kind of like pushing myself physically, but I definitely wanted to, you know, like go for something that like I never like imagined I could do.
Yeah, do something ridiculous.
Do something like ridiculous. Yeah. So
Yeah.
they were all kind of like coinciding along with you know, like the thing like, you know, there's no time like the present, right? Like don't put off like accomplishments, or don't put off like going for something. If you want that in your like on your personal resume, you know, if you want that for the rest of your life, like you have to kind of do it now.
Yeah.
And I always thought like, yeah, like I want my future kids to believe anything is impossible. And how am I going to be able to pass that along if I don't like really really believe it in like in myself?
Hmm. Was that kind of the
So
meaning behind the Zach Bryan quote that you sent me?
yeah, so I think the quote I sent you was off his new album. I think it's like 17 years old. How our grin looks scary brave.
Yeah.
You know, I think you might resonate with this. Like in your teenage years, like young 20s, did you feel like you were kind of like invincible?
It was like,
Or did you believe that like anything was possible in the world?
yeah, I would say more of that. It wasn't like I'm like, oh, I can do. It wasn't so much like I'm invincible, like I can do a gainer off like a cliff or something into a lake
Yeah.
and like stuff like that. I just yeah, I would say my friends might say this as well, but it's like just had a really odd sense of optimism.
Mm,
It would be like I'd be like, oh yeah, like I'm just gonna like I did that for coaching. Like I was like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna move to Kentucky, and they're like, to coach. I'm like, yeah, and then I'll move around. Like I'm trying to get a coaching job, but I would yeah when I was younger, less invincible and more so like anything's possible or like just really optimistic.
yeah, I think maybe less invincible, more of that like optimism is how I would put like my feeling into words. Although I did think I was pretty much invincible at one point. But yeah, I mean that quote I think I resonate with, because as I'm getting older, I have less of that sense of optimism, like unrelenting optimism about being able to accomplish things, or do anything you want. And I really love that quote because it brings me back to that time period in my life where I really did think that anything was possible. And I don't know why as I am getting older, that like intrinsic feeling is kind of fading a little bit, but I think that quote just kind of like helps me like hang on to that. And hey, like if you thought you could do it at 17, like you should think you could do it now. You know, there's nothing really stopping you from still, you know, being able to chase your dreams.
Yeah, it's almost
So
like you're more prepared now. You know more, like
yeah, you're more.
in some
Yeah,
ways.
I definitely wasn't mature enough or disciplined enough at 17 to be able to run a hundred,
Hmm.
or you know like accomplish really much anything. So it is kind of with that maturity that I'm finding that I do have like the discipline to set my mind to certain things, and really like steer your life how you want.
How do you
So
stoke that fire and feed that optimism?
how do I stoke that fire? You know, I think it's, for me personally, it's all who you surround yourself with and who you look up to in life.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but um I think as I'm getting older too, I'm becoming more selective with who I give my time to, and who I choose to hang out with, who I like choose to like glean things from. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I feel like my friend group and circle is getting smaller, but more prominent, more powerful.
Hmm.
And yeah. What about you? Where do you think you you stoke your fire from?
Yeah, just like being optimistic, I think is yeah, I would say like my connection, like
Mm-hmm.
connection with my friends, like they really fill my cup. Like that's my friends are super important to me, and I always tell them that. Like I'm probably the weird friend who's I'm like love you man, and then everybody's like see you dude. And I'm like you can say it back, bro. You can say it back, and they're my best friends. So I would say that's a big one, and optimism is. I think another thing is I just like I believe the good is on the way. And
Mm,
like the good old days are right now. Like little sayings and stuff and talking to my friends about it is super helpful. And I also think just being curious, like learning more. It's like for you, it's like you saw that Courtney Dauwalter documentary and it's like you probably did some more digging, you know?
mm-hmm.
And then it
Yep.
led to, oh man, there's a race in Bend, Oregon. Like, this is 100 miles. So I think curiosity and like deep meaningful connection really helped me stay optimistic because I know when I'm not learning and not just being genuinely curious and I'm also not connected with people who mean a lot to me, I probably thinking out loud here, but I probably become less optimistic. You know, I probably get caught up more in the day to day, which isn't bad at sometimes, you know, when you got to get after it and do your job. But at the same time, it's like being able to pause, like what you said, it's like that time, like as we get older, it's it's not just like jumping. Something I've been thinking about. It's like you're not jumping right back into the routine and then easily forget that you ran that race, or
Mm-hmm.
you could jump back into the routine and kind of like fizzle out the magic from that accomplishment, or yeah, or just like recognizing that magic and then using it the rest of your life. So I would say like connection and being curious help me stay optimistic.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Those are the first two, just off the top of my head.
Do
But
you find a like more meaningful connection with your friends that are like similar age, like or do you have like a lot of role models that are like a lot older than you?
hmm. Mm, that's a really good question. I'm a weirdo. I would say all like I would say my really close friends are my role models as
Mm,
well.
yeah.
I really look up to them, and something I've been practicing, especially these past few months, is like really identifying the attributes that I care about them. Because there's a thing called introjection, which I probably talk about it on every podcast that I've had, but it's this process of inheriting and absorbing the qualities of people that you look up to by one, writing it out and being aware of it, and then two, actively practicing it. And you could do that for people you know or people you've never met.
That's
And
cool.
like Billy Oppenheimer is a writer that I really like, and he talked about it on this podcast where Andrew Huberman, he'd be like working in his lab in grad school by himself, but he wrote out all these attributes of people that he looked up to and why. And so I guess going back to your question, like who are my role models? Like, I there's just a lot of people that I'll break it into different categories. So it's like the people my age, and then there's people that are older than me, and then there's people that are younger than me. Which
Oh, cool.
and I still need the process of making it more readily available, but every once in a while I'll just journal like the things that I look up to them and why I think it's important. So like Chris Williamson, the podcaster, or there's a guy, Bill Perkins. He wrote the book Die with Zero. Or most recently, like I wrote on my newsletter, like Jesse Itzler. I wrote like all these things that I really look up to him and why I think like those are admirable. So I think if I'm more aware of those, then I can better practice them. And like Jesse Itzler is in his 50s, and like I've never met him, but I could still kind of try to be like him and then
Mm-hmm.
embody those attributes. And it's not like I'm copying him. It's I'm going to take those attributes and it's going to be unique because it's me. So, but yeah, that's I think I identify that for my friends, and then I also will do that for people that I've never met. But like in podcasting, I mean, like I'll listen to like I feels like I'm hanging out with Chris Williamson, you know? Like I hang out with
Mm-hmm.
that dude probably 3 hours a week.
That's cool.
Or like a bunch of like I'm a nerd on podcasts, so I'll listen to them a lot. But I include those as in the people like that quote. It's like you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, it's
Mm.
like I spend a lot of time in my headphones with some people that I've never really met before. So yeah, that was a really good question, actually.
That's cool. I love that. I love that. You're helping me put like my thoughts too, like into words. So very
Hell yeah,
cool. Yeah.
dude, that's sick. That's a good compliment. I appreciate it. That's
Yeah,
like,
that's good.
I mean, that's one of my favorite things about podcasting. It's yeah, I heard this like it's an Irish poem this guy wrote recently. Like I'm not gonna read the whole thing because it's huge. It's a big paragraph. But one thing was a lot of conversations are just like ping pong. They're back and forth. So it's like I get to talk, so then you get to talk, then I get to
Mm-hmm.
talk, and then you get to talk. But it's like he wrote this poem. I could text it to you afterwards. But it's like the
Please.
real magic is when you both get to a place you didn't know was there, and it's like you could only get there because the conversation with each other elevated you to that place, which I think is like I think that's why I love podcasting, you know.
Yeah, that's
And
incredible. That's
yeah,
really cool.
and bringing it full circle, going back to the optimism thing, I just connected this, but it's like I think that's one reason why I love podcasting is because I'm super curious about your experience with the
Mm-hmm.
race, and this is awesome being able to connect over it, and then that just makes me more optimistic. And it's like we're getting to a place about the race that you couldn't like I couldn't get to that place by talking to someone else who wasn't there, especially someone who didn't experience it. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
that's cool. It's like I can talk to my parents, you, and Rory, Connor, and Dirk, and that's it. Like those are the only people who really get it. You know,
Yeah.
just like with your crew, like if you call them and talk to them about it, they're like, "Oh, I remember you shivering." You
Right.
know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I was
No, that's awesome.
yeah. It's I was I did want to ask you about this because I know we talked a little bit before the pod started about like fatherhood, and you were talking about your life resume and
Mm-hmm.
like doing things to put on your life resume, but for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what how has that process been of being like, okay, I'm about to be a father soon? That's like a different 100-mile race.
Oh, it is for sure. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm going about it in the right way, but I think, when I found out that I was going to be a dad, it kind of makes me want to be more of the best version of myself now than ever, right? Like
Hmm.
now I'm not just doing it for myself, which is important. You're not doing it for the people like around you, but you're doing it for someone who will hopefully one day look up to you, right? And really, what do you want to pass on to them?
Hmm.
So just like a lot of introspection, like thinking about who I want to be, who do I want my kid to be, and how can I pass that on to them? Looking at traits of other fathers that I admire, and
Oh, that's cool.
really trying to put words to what I admire about them and what I admire about how they're raising their kids,
Hmm.
and vice versa. Just on a daily basis, if you see like an interaction between like a parent and a kid that you don't necessarily agree with, like trying to put words to that, and like, okay, what didn't I like about that? What do I think that I would have done differently? It's not
Hmm.
like shaming how they're parenting at all. It's just trying to build a good picture of what you think you want your parenting style to be, how you want your relationship with your kid to be, and really just trying to build that life with, for me, my wife, having these conversations with her too. I mean, fortunate for our kid, she's probably the best person in the entire world. So I'm already absolutely stoked that our kid is going to get to know her as a person, growing up. And I'm reading book recommendations, listening to podcasts, and just really like reflecting on how in the next 7 months can I be or become or on my way to become like a better version of myself. And I think a lot of that is identifying who you spend your time around and what you get from them, and who you wish you could spend your time around and what would you get from them. So it's kind of like what you were saying, really just like pull those attributes from like the people you admire, whether they're younger, the same age, or older, and try to practically, like, once you identify them, how can you apply them to your life? And for, because it's not just like enough to identify them, you actually have to put them into practice, right?
Yeah.
So I think
100%.
more than ever, I've just been like trying to be conscious of all these thoughts, and like more conscious of my actions. And I think the more intentional I am with these conversations and like with these thoughts, like the more of a habit will start to form going forward. At least
Yeah.
that's my approach. I'll let you know if it works in the future.
Hey, no, that's super cool. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Are you writing that stuff down, or what is that? Or are you just more like thinking on it?
I should write it down because, my wife journals, you journal, and I think it's very important to write it down. I just haven't gotten to a place where I've started that habit. So a lot of it is just mental processing, I guess, keeping everything inside. And I think it would be good to like have these conversations with more, you know, especially like male figures that you respect and admire, and get their feedback of like different topics as well.
Yeah,
But
that's a good point,
yeah.
because I think it's super interesting. It's like maybe it's an underrated. uh it's just not talked about a lot, but I think
Hmm.
it's like a guy's life of between the ages of like 20, maybe 26, 27 to like 33 is such a unique time in your life where you start asking yourself like a lot more like really tough questions.
Mm.
And one of those questions is like, dang, why didn't I think about this sooner? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're like, shit. And then, but I think it's such a unique time because you're like, okay, do I really want to be doing X?
Hmm.
Or where do I really want to be? Or something. You pointed this out. I heard this on a podcast recently, but you brought it more to parenting, which I've actually never really thought about. Um, but you brought this up about like, who do you want to become in the next 7 months? But it was this idea. I think it's CJ Finley on his podcast. He talked about, are you getting married or being married?
Whoa.
And then it's like a lot of people prep for the wedding and a lot of people prep to be married. And then it's the same thing for a parent, it's like, are you having a kid or are you being a parent?
Hmm.
And it's like there's a big difference, like, and it's like I don't know, you just made me think about that, and I was like, all right, it's like, who are you becoming? And it's like, yeah, you want to prep as much as you can, but also like similar to the race, it's like when you it's not like you're like, oh, that was all my race prep, now it started. It's like you're prepping during the race of raising your child. Once they're It's like you're being a parent versus having a kid. But
Right.
I don't know, that was
Right.
kind of like a shotgun spray of you had me churning with what you were saying.
No. Yeah. No. I like it.
Yeah,
That's,
it's interesting. Like imagine like even just like it's like what you said about your close group of friends. It's like having those
yeah.
conversations. Like, hey, what kind of parent have you guys ever wanted to be? And having those talks, like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to talk to your friends like that. You just made me think about that too.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I guess that all the really close guys in my life that I look up to, none of them are parents yet, right? That are like my age, like the really, really, really close ones, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know, that you admire more than anything. So then I'm looking at, I loved how I was raised, so let me talk to my dad more. Let me talk to other
Mm-hmm.
men that are currently parents to see their thoughts on how to be a good parent, or what do they try to implement, but I think putting things down in writing is important, so you can go back and tangibly look at your thoughts. And one thing that I have been meaning to ask my father, just like in his life or in my life, was I've always wanted a list of things that he wanted to pass down to me.
Hmm.
Ideas, concepts, practices, beliefs, just everything that when he was like preparing, when he found out that like he was going to be a dad, right? There's just like a ton of things that like you don't really put into words, but what do I want to pass down to my kid, right? And I think talking to you, like I will ask my dad to try to at least put that into words for me,
Huh.
and get that down in writing. Just like the things that before he dies, what do you want to pass down to me? And I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah,
You know?
that's sick. What's one thing you think you would say?
Oh boy. Hmm. I think he would say first and foremost the importance of having complete control over your emotions, almost on like a stoic level.
Huh.
Um, my dad is probably one of the most like even keel men like I've ever met, and I really do admire him for that. Of course, he gets excited, like very happy, and
Yeah,
and
like
maybe
at that race. I'm just
oh
kidding.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But um, I think that's something that he has passed down to me, but he's never said it. That's completely been by example, and
Hmm.
and and that's the type of father that I hope to be. I
Hmm.
hope my future kids pick up things from me just off of example.
Hmm. That's super
But
cool.
yeah, I
Maybe
think
that's
control.
a. Or what were you gonna say?
No, so I think the number one thing would be like probably like just control over your emotions,
Huh.
and and yeah,
That's cool. You got to start your list too of like what you'd pass on.
I know, that
Yeah.
that'll probably be, I don't know, maybe like a lifelong list, honestly.
Yeah. That's
But
cool. Maybe that could be the challenge going away from this podcast is you ask your dad about that. And I really think something I've been wanting to do that I've been slacking on is I've always wanted to record a podcast with my dad just on
mm,
video, and like I don't even have to publish it. I just want the video, and
that'd be really cool.
I want the time capsule of being like, yo, were you ever just like in college and do like messed up,
Hmm.
or what was it like X, Y, and Z, or like my dad was in the military, so it's like what'd you learn from traveling around, like living in Turkey and Germany and Ethiopia or whatever. It's like I feel like the second the mic turns on, he's gonna share something maybe that I've never heard before. So that could be our challenge coming out of this pod. But um, dude, we've been jamming for almost 2 hours, which is
It's crazy.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just want to say like thank you so much for just being vulnerable and being able to share like this was such a cool experience of just like recapping the race and being able to go back and forth like it honestly, it's just like a conversation, like joking around. And um, it's I just really appreciate your time and willing to jump on here and go back and forth on our experiences of running 100 miles. And it's seriously like I've just been cheesing the whole time because it's like, oh yeah, like I remember that, or like even what you said is like the gels, and I was like, oh, I forgot about those, like just like random stuff like that. So I just super appreciate your presence, and it's pretty crazy how it's like doing something like that. It's like you just like you're a friend. Like
Mhm.
it's such a cool thing coming out of the experience. Like even after the race, like I was so pumped to see you. I was like, "Oh, dude, like what's up?" And, like I got to send you the picture after this pod that my mom
Please do.
took. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I can't thank you enough, and it's an honor, getting to come on your podcast and talk to you a little bit, and I was so stoked that we met at the race, and I do hope that like our friendship continues, and like I get to know you more.
yeah,
I do mean that you're an awesome guy, so we'll
yeah,
we'll definitely stay in touch.
yeah. I can't wait. I think I really do think people are gonna love this pod. I know for sure. I'm gonna send it to my buddies that were a part of my crew because they can relate. But outside of the podcast, I just like this conversation was a ton of fun, and I just really appreciate you.
Of course, man. Anytime.
Hell yeah! All right, well, I'll make sure to I'll post your social media so people can follow along and see the growth of fatherhood, and as well as maybe what's the next challenge that you're doing.
For sure. Sounds good.
All right, peace out, everybody.